Now, this is an interesting phenomenon. Person A competes for something really big and then comes up short. Now, in this hypothetical contest, only, of course, one side wins, and person A is on the losing side. And yet, after suffering a defeat, person A emerges more arrogant and more self-assured than ever before, proclaiming that had certain things just happened differently, he or she indeed would have won. And in person A, we see very little introspection, zero humility, and frankly, zero logic. Now, perhaps most disturbing in this scenario is when person A tries to use his or her loss as a selling point. Now, 4 people in particular who fit the mold in recent weeks come to mind. First up, Tallahassee Mayor Andrew Gillum. Remember, he lost his bid to be governor of Florida. Now, he couldn't beat Ron DeSantis, but now he fancies himself as the great Trump slayer of Florida.
We are going to commit ourselves to registering and engaging 1 million voters between now and 2020's presidential election. We can deny Donald Trump a second term. This isn't the sexy work, I gotta admit. I'm sure it's probably more fun for some of those out there running for president. This is the hard work of democracy.
Now, remember, he could be running for president, but he's decided to do the really hard stuff. Like, I have a question. Why should the Democrats listen to him on anything? He's a loser. Why should anyone listen to him? Well, I'll tell you why. Because he's a self-appointed spokesman for the loser grievance culture that we've developed here. And without a compliant media working hand in glove with these losers, elevating their message, their stature, the losers wouldn't feel so emboldened. But boy, do they. Now, consider arrogant loser number 2. Stacey Abrams, who lost her race for governor to Brian Kemp in Georgia. Now, remember, though, she didn't lose. They took it from her.
Citizens tried to exercise their constitutional rights and were still denied the ability to elect their leaders. Under the watch of the now former Secretary of State, democracy failed Georgia. So let's be clear. This is not a speech of concession.
Okay, so she doesn't concede. That's gracious. And she's never once been called out for her shameless racial fear-mongering. She became a statewide official and may have a future at some point again in politics, but she acts like she owns the entire Democrat field for 2020. Now, what am I talking about? She scoffs at the notion pushed by the nascent Biden campaign of being Uncle Joe's vice presidential running mate.
I think you don't run for second place. If I'm going to enter a primary, then I'm going to enter a primary. And if I don't enter the primary, my job is to make certain that the best Democrat becomes the nominee, and whoever wins the primary, that we make certain that person gets elected in 2020.
Enter the primary? Hello, you lost the governor's race. I mean, gosh, you and your opponent made history spending more than $100 million on a governor's race, and you still couldn't pull out a victory. I mean, it happens. But you think you call the shots?
Running in a primary to be vice president is very different than someone who has been selected by the party to be the nominee, right, asking you to serve as a partner. Right. And I am open to all options.
How amazing. The chutzpah. Now, I'll bet she's open to all options. Yeah. Well, then there's our third loser, Beto O'Rourke. Now, he's treated like the crown prince of Texas, despite suffering a significant defeat at the hands of Ted Cruz in the Texas Senate race. Remember, he had the whole landscape of the media behind him, spent all this money, but he has issues grasping reality.
You have a president who, in my opinion, beyond the shadow of a doubt, sought to, however ham-handedly, collude with the Russian government, a foreign power, to undermine and influence our elections.
Now, that was Saturday. Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. All right, good luck advancing the collusion narrative now, Robert Francis. All right, and our last loser trying to claim victory is Jussie Smollett. Now, he faked a hate crime, sent Chicago PD into weeks of investigations, took up oxygen in the national conversation, and he likely frightened minorities already concerned about the racial atmosphere in America. His actions and the follow-up were utterly despicable. But he's been taught to win by Doing what? Well, playing the victim, of course, which is what he did on Tuesday.
I've been truthful and consistent on every single level since day one. I would not be my mother's son if I was capable of one drop of what I've been accused of. This has been an incredibly difficult time.
Well, his lawyer goes on to leave open the possibility that Jussie would try perhaps to collect money in a lawsuit against the Chicago PD.
We're weighing our options now. For Jussie, what's really important is he really just wants his career and his life back. Again, he did not ask for any of this. He was a victim of a crime.
At some point, can lawyers be sanctioned for just saying something that's blatantly false on national television? And what does the NAACP do to reward criminal behavior? Well, loser behavior? Well, of course, they nominate him for an NAACP award, of course.
I hope he's here. I hope he's here, and I hope he wins. I hope everyone wins. It's a big event, and, you know, I'm glad everything has worked out for him.
Now, here's what's happening. There is this impulse to shower losers with accolades and importance when the losers are anti-Trump. If you're pro-Trump and you lose, you just have to get over it and get out of the way. Accept the results. Not so on the other side. And Hollywood, the news media, print journalists, if you're anti-Trump, will work overtime to rewrite your narrative for you. Now, remember in Home Alone? Remember when Kevin McAllister took on the bad guys?
Okay, kid. Give it to me.
Directed.
Okay, but it was never the fault of the wet bandits. The blame was solely on the poor kid whose parents left him home alone. My friends, if you want to remake America from soup to nuts or rob some houses around Christmas time, well, you don't have time for recuperating or changing your technique. Instead, what do? You double down on failure. You act like you won big, you just hit the lotto, and you blame your loss on someone else. Very, very mature. No other profession treats losers this way that I can think of, but in politics, reality is often suspended. You don't deserve anything, though, right? We were taught that you need to earn it. All those parents who bribed their kids' way into college thought their kids deserved to go to Yale or USC or Wake Forest or Stanford. It's just that the system was screwed up, so they decided to game the system. And ultimately, the fraud was discovered. I think the American people are sharper than the left gives them credit for. I don't think they like all this radicalism, nor the entitlement mentality that seems to be infecting all races, all ethnicities today. Folks want basic fairness, basic standards of decency, common sense, not fanatical efforts to deconstruct America and reconstruct her into what Teddy Roosevelt called the polyglot boarding house. Being a loser doesn't mean, of course, you can't win again. I'm not saying that. Reagan showed us that. He lost in '76, came back in 1980. The rest is history. But it also doesn't mean that you should expect the rest of us to bow down at your every word just because you say them with enough breathless indignation about how much you don't like Donald Trump. Get up, brush yourself off, and try again. But you have to earn respect to win the votes. And you're only going to do that by making a persuasive argument, not by haughtily assuming that victory is going to be yours just because you showed up and you lost the first time. And that's the angle.